No one ever taught me how to found a business, how to raise money, how to build a team, pursue intellectual properties, build a business plan. We don't teach doctors how to do that.
I love that story. It's just like any good entrepreneur's journey.
Looking at every interaction as an opportunity, it sounds a little cliche, but it really does help.
Unpack a couple things in there.
You got to believe that technology solves a problem that you have as a doc. If you don't believe that, you're never going to be able to successfully champion it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
First step is not trying to do it on your own. Build a group of consultants who can help you chunk that out, figure out where you need to go, and don't waste a lot of money otherwise.
It all starts with a problem.
I have absolutely no training in anything but the surgical skills.
Pretty much everybody either knows someone or themselves has had back surgery.
Frustrations with the care of my own patients, I set out on the journey to found my own Medtech company, ComboSpine, Combination Spine.
One thing that you did so uniquely with ComboSpine and the whole business model around it was Hey everyone, Spencer Jones here, founder at Exo Medtech. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Exo Medtech Innovation Podcast. With us today, I'm so thrilled, someone that I am lucky enough to call a friend, Dr. Josh Ammerman. He's a practicing neurosurgeon, physician executive, entrepreneur, liquor connoisseur, and producer, actually, part of his entrepreneurial endeavors. Based out of Washington, D.C. Had the pleasure of knowing Josh for 2 years, and I think you guys will see why he's one of my favorite people on the planet. But Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Spencer, thanks for having me on today. Excited to chat.
Absolutely. So would love if you could just tell the audience a little bit more about you, kind of your background, what you do professionally, your entrepreneurial endeavors, and kind of how you got to where you are with ComboSpine.
Sure, it'd be my pleasure, and I'll keep my focus around med tech, even though I love to talk about booze anytime. So I'm a Washington, D.C. native, third-generation neurosurgeon with a focus clinically in minimally invasive spine care. One of my partners is my brother. I can talk about the good and bad of that at some point as well. But early on in my practice, I recognized that I wanted to do a little bit more than just patient care. I had an opportunity to serve in a number of different roles as a physician executive. I'm currently the president of Washington Neurosurgical Associates. I've been the department chair for the Department of Surgery at Sibley, led the neurosurgery section as well, and served as the medical director for perioperative services, and during that time helped to lead the value analysis process. And then based upon some frustrations with the care of my own patients and the inability to find a strategic partner who wanted to address my concerns, I set out on the journey to found my own medtech company, ComboSpine, Combination Spine, and that's really been my focus aside from my clinical practice for the past few years.
One piece there I just picked up was kind of the inability of not only existing solutions on the market, but trying to get others, right, or trying to find strategic partners that are interested in solving this problem. So I do want to dig in more about ComboSpine in a second, but talk through, what do you mean by that? We're trying to find strategic partners to solve this problem.
Sure. So after you've been in practice for a while, you begin to recognize that you have particular challenges with patient care, particularly in the operating room, and colleagues have those same challenges. And you all start to talk and you say, geez, we should get somebody to fix this because we can make a better mousetrap than the way we're doing it. For me, it was around disc-based prep. And through contacts, through practice, you get to know strategic partners in our space. These are the companies like Johnson & Johnson or Medtronic. And you approach them and you say, hey, I've got a great idea. And they analyze those opportunities, and it may or may not fit into their business set for a host of reasons. But the need still arises for the patient and for the care. And after sitting in enough meetings, realizing that the things were important to me, which was exactly when people went to go answer their cell phone or go to get coffee or go to pee, it became clear I was going to have to set out on my own if I wanted to solve that.
I love that story. It's just like any good solution, like any good entrepreneur's journey, or at least the good one's entrepreneur's journey. It all starts with a problem, right? So what is ComboSpine? What do you do? What problem are you solving?
Sure. So ComboSpine is our solution to the challenge of disc-based preparation for interbody fusion. There are a lot of inefficiencies of the procedures that we do for this. The operation doesn't work great. It's fraught with challenges. And so we wanted to mechanize, standardize, and cost control those components of that procedure. And it's the development of a platform that solves all of those issues. And it's through that lens for the past few years, going on close to 4 years at this point, that I've gone through the early physician entrepreneurial leadership journey. And really starting to understand, I think, fairly well at this point, what are the challenges, what are the benefits, What are the lessons learned from this experience?
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's pretty much everybody either knows someone or themselves has had, back surgery, right? Back fusion. It's such an interesting space. So digging into that transition, that journey, right? So the development and the transitional role of kind of the physician entrepreneur into being a founder, that is, I'm sure, fraught with exciting parts that you wish you would have done better. Kind of, let's just start there. What are some parts what's the most rewarding part of it thus far? And then what are some of the big challenges or things that you wish you would have done better over the past, 2-3 years?
Sure. The two most rewarding things are recognizing that you're developing and moving forward with something that's going to help patients, and not just patients generically, but your patients. And equally rewarding is the relationships that one develops as they build out a team, right? So as a physician entrepreneur, I have absolutely no training in anything but the surgical skills. No one ever taught me how to found a business, how to raise money, how to build a team, pursue intellectual properties, build a business plan. We don't teach doctors how to do that. So if I want to get to the point of helping my patients and being successful, I needed to learn how to do all those things. And the critical piece was surrounding myself with people who could teach me and partner with me, like yourself, to achieve that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And you started this journey 2021, roughly?
2021, rattled around in my brain a little bit before that, but that's a pretty good number.
Right. So what, kind of looking back, what are some things, 1, 2, however many, where you look back and say, knowing what I know now, I wish I would have not done that or done this differently?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things a physician, founder, or entrepreneur in general is to get right away connected to either a group, an organization, a business that can help you understand what you're going to have to do and present you with the resources. And nowadays there are actually groups that do that. So the mistake I made is I said, well, I have to design a device, so I'm just going to go find an engineer. And I found a group of engineers, wonderful people, right? Wonderful people, but they had other priorities and they weren't thinking about founding a business. They were helping me just solve a mechanical problem. So I was lucky enough through that transition, as you recall, to connect with Medical Merge, and through their design studio had the opportunity to partner with you, which has blossomed into one of the great friendships and business relationships of my career. So I think that first step is not trying to do it on your own. Don't start out just trying to solve the clinical problem. Build a team, and that doesn't have to be your full-time team. Build a group of consultants who can help you chunk that out and figure out where you need to go. And don't waste a lot of money otherwise.
Yeah. No, I've seen that happen many times where, just like you said, you need the device designed, you need engineers, you go to an engineering firm. And I've seen them do great work. And maybe it's, you come up with 8 amazing concepts, right? But the holistic approach of looking at the business, the market, the competition, the viability of certain complexities that, right, are going to cost an arm and a leg or may not be resilient enough for the specific application. We talk a lot about user needs, but there's also user and design constraints that are sometimes market driven or things that those engineers are just not thinking of. So
Amen.
Unless you kind of wrap all of those things around the process, you may end up with a beautifully elegant and sometimes overly complex, right, design that looks great on paper, might not work, right? Or may not be machinable or producible at scale or cost effective, right? So yeah.
That's exactly it, right? You can draw it out on paper, you can build a model, but can anybody actually build it for clinical production? Is it going to cost too much? Is the market going to be there for it? You need that help all along the way. And when I started this journey, there really wasn't anybody to give me that education. And now there are resources like XO that exist to be able to get those first steps, boots on the ground, before you go running down the fundraising path, which is a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah, no, for sure. Before we talk about fundraising, I do want to just, thinking about kind of key pitfalls, critical decisions to make. You mentioned kind of the team around you, and I'm thinking of that in almost a day-to-day sense, right? But I'm just curious, a lot of founders, a big step to them, whether it's the IP firm, legal counsel, regulatory consultants, kind of those types of people. And I would even extend that to kind of laboratory partners, third-party labs, and then contract manufacturers as well. But just talk to me. I know there's been a lot of work done on this, right, at the ComboSpine level. And I think it's something that ComboSpine has as a strength, is the relationships that they've built with those service providers and people. So just any words of wisdom for founders as they're going through the process of finding, vetting, and building relationships with those people.
Yeah. So the first thing you have to decide is, are you going to be the person that keeps the trains running on time, or are you going to bring someone onto your team to do that? As a clinician, if you're a doc, and you're going to continue to practice, you're not going to be able to do it on your own. And so that is probably the most important person to find, is somebody who is going to manage all those parts. And it really should be someone who's had experience in the space. You can't just pick a genius out of the crowd. They're not going to have the relationship. So that's number one from my perspective. Number two is making sure you engage with engineering folks who have those connections already for manufacturing, for testing, right? Has all those folks that they've worked with over time that can design something that can actually be built, as we talked about. There's way too many people who design things that are way too complex. Legal support is important. Don't overemphasize that. Yeah, you need someone to file your patents. Yeah, you need somebody to incorporate your business. But over time, that comes later. And I think if you do those other pieces, you build out a business plan, you have your manufacturers and your engineering components in place, you understand your clinical need, then you can then engage in, which I know we'll talk about later, in fundraising, right? But those are the pieces that you got to take forward. And if you can't do that, you're never going to raise money, and you're never going to solve the problem, and you're going to spend.
Yeah, no, for sure. Founders are very typically, right? They're extroverted. They like people. They like talking and engaging. They're easy to make friends with, right? And I've seen a lot of founders that will start the process of whether it's contract manufacturing group or consultant or what have you, and they'll immediately be endeared to those people because maybe they're talking to a business development person that's extroverted, and they can kind of get like, whoever I'm talking to first is who I want to go with. But I always harp this: 3 quotes for everything. When it's super critical relationships, get double that, get 6. And I think, we don't think about quotes with people as much, but you really should think about like, hey, like this is a consultant or service provider, and yes, they're a person, and they'll have a quote eventually. But sometimes when it's that person, it's a little bit more one-on-one, and you can't fall in love with people's personalities. You got to think like, I'm going to talk to multiple people, and I'm going to try to find the best person, right?
Well, you have taught me the wisdom of that all along. Sorry to step in there. You've taught me the wisdom of that. So those are words that I share as well, right? Never one quote, never one time, at least 3.
For sure. So let's talk about fundraising. So I've been posting a good bit of data on this. You've been living and breathing it. We've been living and breathing it. It has been a tough fundraising climate. It was, I don't know if you listen to Scott Galloway's podcast, but he talks about the champagne and cocaine days of the 80s. And then he applies that to the fundraising environment of, 2021, 2022, and then it hit the Wile E. Coyote running off the cliff, right? So there's been some things to suggest data-wise that it's been stabilizing, but it's just been really tough. So we'll ask some more detailed questions here, but just kind of your general take on fundraising and the fundraising journey ComboSpine's been on.
Yeah. So, right, the days of showing up with a PowerPoint and getting $15 million, that's long since gone. I think from a fundraising perspective now, you need to present a compelling argument, clinically and business-wise. You need to be able to present it as the founder and the CEO. And if you're not prepared to do that, you need to develop a storyteller or gain storytelling skills, because people do want to hear from you. It's really hard. And as a company, every dime and every month of burn matters, particularly when you're small and when you're starting. So really spending the time to calculate what your burn is and how rapidly you need to fundraise can help inform what kind of evaluation you can set for yourself, right? If you've got a long runway, you can be more selective. I think, so those are sort of the pieces off the top. Things that I did not appreciate or know that I know now. First dollars are way harder than last dollars. Getting to the 50-yard line on your fundraising opens up all sorts of opportunities. Having a lead investor that is willing to make a substantial commitment to you, has put together diligence that they're willing to share, are critical pieces. I would also share, as a founder, you're going to have to spend some of your own money to get going, and you need to be prepared to budget for that. It's taken, we've been at the fundraising game for quite some time. We are having success with it, but it is a long haul, and you're going to have to give something up to get it.
Yeah. No, that's so true. It's so much of a numbers game too. I think that's something that a lot of founders are typically successful people. They're used to success. They don't like doing things that they're not good at. They don't like being told no. But when you tell people, hey, it's going to be like a 5% hit rate, like on, you pitch 100 people, 5 will say yes. I would say individuals, right? You may pitch a room of 20, we'll count those as 20, right? But I think some people think, yeah, that's for the rest of the crowd, right? I am, the creme de la creme.
I am the chairman of surgery. I am a neurosurgeon. Who wouldn't want to give me money? And then you go and you talk to all kinds of people and they're like, no, thanks. You can't let your ego get bruised. Your prior experience counts for something, but it doesn't count for too much. So you gotta be compelling, you gotta tell the story, and you gotta be okay with people saying no and being able to follow up and say, okay, you're not gonna invest in us, but can you help me in some other way? Can you connect me with another potential investor? Can you offer some advice on why you didn't invest in us or me? I think looking at every interaction as an opportunity, it sounds a little cliche, but it really does help.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And you mentioned something else I want to hit on is the value of a lead investor. And I feel like that term gets thrown around a lot. You know, you can be a lead investor and invest less than 50% or less than 30%, right, of the total round. Being a lead, more than anything, is diligence, right? Someone driving diligence that other angel groups can trust. Being a lead is about negotiating that term sheet, right? And at times it's putting someone, electing that board member to represent the Series Seed that, you know, people can look at and say, hey, I really trust this guy. That's something I think, looking back on kind of the ComboSpine fundraising effort, we would have had a better lens for, in terms of like, hey, we need to be targeting people that will lead, right? And it's one of those things where, you know, it's kind of chicken or the egg, but also, you know, when you develop relationships with investors, right? And it's a long-term thing. It's not like you pitch them, they say yes or no, right? And then that's it. You never talk to them again. I'll pause there with and the question coming back to you is, you know, talk to us about when you think of a lead investor, like how much you heard about that from other investors when you were pitching, and then also about kind of the longevity of a relationship with investors and how, you know, how that relationship can build into an investment when it started with a no.
Yeah, so great points all the way across the board. I had no idea about the value of a lead before I started this. I think I learned about that from some fellow who lives in Arkansas. But it's everything, right? And so, you know, I was once told by a very wise man that if you are trying to raise $1 million and you bring in $50,000 a month, which isn't a bad hit rate, it's going to take a really long time. And so you do need those big pocket and deep pocket folks to be able to continue to propel your business forward, number one. Number two, we are now cycling back with groups that over a year ago we spoke to who gave us a no and are now ready to give us a yes. And the reason they're ready to give us a yes, in my opinion, is number one, we've stayed in touch. We've maintained a relationship. We picked out a few members in that group to continue to connect with one. Two, we've made them aware of the evolution of our story, and we have evolved. We have continued to progress from when they initially met us. And then three, we've demonstrated our ability to raise funds and get a commitment, right, from a lead investor. And that's sort of, I think that take home is people are willing to invest when you have a lead, when you get close to that 50-yard line, you have diligence to report. There's a term sheet that they can participate in. I'm sure your readers, your listeners know what a term sheet is. Those are the key things, but pounding away and keeping that relationship warm is everything.
Yeah. And you said something earlier about how powerful storytelling is, and like that's kind of during the pitch. And I think when you're building those relationships with investors, don't ever be salty, right? It's like, hey, it's not a great fit right now. I always recommend to founders, like whether it's providing an investor update, being active on social media, or a newsletter, kind of whatever fits for you and your business. Put those investors kind of in the jet stream of continuing to see you grow and build your business, because that in itself becomes a story. It becomes a history, a track record, a trajectory that they can look at and say, hey, yeah, I saw them in April, but they've continued to really do great things. Oh, now they've got a lead, right? Let's have that conversation again. So I just, always preach that, right? You're kind of creating a relationship that has some longevity to it. So I do want to talk about startup teams in a second. I think the audience would really benefit from hearing about your experience leading a value analysis committee. There's been a lot of talk, I was just posting about this morning, about value analysis committees, how they've shifted surgeons' influence over decision making, and who better to hear it from than you, a surgeon who's led a VAC. So talk to us about how you've seen that landscape change, with respect to value analysis committees and surgeons influencing purchasing decisions.
Sure. So I'd be happy to. Stop me if I go on too long on this topic. I did have the opportunity, as you said, earlier in my career as a medical director to lead our local value analysis process. Value analysis, right, is about getting the right products to care for patients at the right price. That's the goal of it. I will tell you, I've looked at the data on this. Nobody's ever demonstrated that value analysis leads to better patient care. I've written about this. Please feel free to look at our LinkedIn on it. Nonetheless, it has become the gatekeeper for medical device in hospitals, in ambulatory surgery centers. Value analysis committees used to be housed at the level of the hospital. Many of them now are housed at the level of a health system or potentially with a group purchasing organization, which is another animal to manage out there. And in the past, the surgeons dominated approval. I would say I would like widget X and the hospital would go get widget X and they would get the best price they could for that, but that widget was coming. The power of the individual physician is markedly diminished. There's no doubt about that. And so it is incumbent on the company, with the physician's support, you still need that champion, right, who's going to bring it forward and say, I need this, and here's the clinical argument, to now make the argument about the financial piece. So when we look at value analysis, or when we looked at value analysis, it's a collaborative effort including physicians, nursing, operations and finance people, as well as sterile processing, which in the operating room is critical, and supply chain team, looking at what is the clinic, 3 buckets. What is the clinical need? How is this better than existing technology? Is there actual clinical data to support this, or is this just conjecture or opinion? 1. 2, what's the financial performance look like for this in terms of the direct cost, any savings that might exist, and how it might indirectly improve things like throughput, reduce demand on sterile processing, things of that nature. And then lastly, uniqueness, right? Is this unique? The best products, the easiest pathway forward is clinically superior, financial savings, improved throughput, and uniqueness. And not every device is going to check all those boxes, though I'm confident, I'm hopeful that ComboSpine's platforms will. And then it's presenting that information in a compelling way that drives that argument forward. One of the big things that is driving value analysis right now and the opportunity is, can we do one more case? Can I do one more operation? Will you save me enough time with this that I can do more surgery? Because that is how facilities drive their bottom line. Hospital margins are small. Throughput is king. Ambulatory surgery centers, that's an even bigger deal for. The other thing I'd like to add on, it is very hard to get through value analysis charging more for an item that is competitive with existing technology that they've approved. If I'm going to bring you a pen and it writes better and it's a better color and it feels better in my hand, but it's $25 more than the pen you use, But if I'm going to bring you a pen that does its job better and costs the same or even less to implement at your facility, that is a very different path. And value analysis is very open to that. It is much less interested in spending more money for the same tech.
Yeah, preach. That was fantastic. So unpack a couple things in there. So I think we talked about design constraints, user needs, design constraints, right? I think one thing that you did so uniquely with ComboSpine and the whole business model around it was having the VAC and this evolved viewpoint of the VAC, and then kind of like the need for cost parity, even with more innovative products, right? Talk to us about how you built the business model with that design constraint in mind.
Sure. So people had tried to solve my clinical problem in the past, and they failed for two reasons. One, they failed because their technology didn't work particularly well, but also their technology just had a cost, right? It was just adding to the overall cost of the procedure and reducing revenue, not very appealing model to a hospital. It's sort of and that has killed a fair bit of good technology. So when we built out ComboSpine, we said we're going to have a clinical solution and we're going to build a business solution at the exact same time. We're not going to wait to the end to figure out how we're going to do it. And what we recognized is that there are certain items in surgery that are reimbursable. In our case, those are fusion devices, implants that go in the disc space, interbody cages, interbody fusion devices. That if we built an entire platform that included a superior disc space prep paired it to a superior implant, we could turn something that just lost money into something that could generate revenue, particularly in the outpatient setting, which is where the transition for surgery is occurring. So our understanding of that as a team has helped us build out a model that I think will resonate strongly with facilities as we move through our own value analysis process. Understanding what the contracting model is of your facility that you're trying to enter into is absolutely critical. Is it an all-play model where as long as you meet certain pricing, you can come in? Is it a percentage-based model where they only have 3 vendors or they have 2 vendors that get 80% of business and 20% is carved out? You need to tailor your approach to that facility, to those pieces. And you need to reach out not just to the business leaders at that hospital before the committee meets, but you need to touch all the other interested parties. In our case, sterile processing is very important to make sure that they are seeing the value you're bringing, and when they're given an opportunity to speak to that, they can advocate on your behalf as well.
Following on to that, you said finding out what the kind of payment model is for that specific facility. Who should we ask, right? Like if I'm a founder trying to sell to the hospital, like who's going to be able to answer that question?
So you may find it harder than you think to get the answer to that question. There's a couple of places you can go. Number one, starting with the whoever leads perioperative services on the operations and business side. In some places, they are very transparent. They will share with you their evaluation process, their contracting models, and you'll know what you're getting into. If you can't get the answer to that way, then I think there's two other great sources. One, the surgeon. That is information that many surgeons, if they're willing to take the time, can learn from the operations leadership. And I think it's a fair thing to know and understand, so that you can provide the most useful information, and asking your surgeon to get that. But most of the teams in a hospital in the OR will have a clinical lead that oversees a certain area of care, in my case, neurosurgery or spine. That person, while they deal with the physicians on a direct basis, they're usually from nursing, will understand the business model as well. And they're usually somebody that the distributors have dealt with in the past. They have an existing relationship over other technology. That person is a key stakeholder in the process, can be a key advocate or kill your product, and will be able to lay out for you and have the best chance of giving you an understanding of what their business model at that facility looks like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. One thing I think we've all seen is sales reps are really not being allowed into the hospital as much. I mean, honestly, it can feel at times like hospitals are trying to keep sales reps out. And it's pretty rare these days that they're invited to the value analysis committee to give that presentation to the VAC, right? They're relying more on the clinical champion, right, to provide their voice and to lead that product through. So one thing I know a lot of founders kind of think about or struggle with is developing that clinical champion, right? Like doctors and surgeons, they're just incredibly busy, right? And it's one of these things where you may have a lot, maybe it's even just a short 10 or 12 slide deck, but can you expect them to memorize that and learn that? Or maybe you don't, and maybe it's you give them some different information. But just from your position as a surgeon, kind of what is an ideal way that you prefer people to kind of develop you as a clinical champion for their product?
Sure. It's a great question. I've had the opportunity to hold that role many times in the past, and now I'm looking at it from the other side of the coin. So number one, you got to believe. You got to believe that technology solves a problem that you have as a doc. If you don't believe that, you're never going to be able to successfully champion it. So I need to see it. I need to play with it in the lab. I need to be convinced it will work in my hands. I also need to learn that this is probably an alpha version of a device. It's not going to be as smooth as what's been out for a very long time, and be willing to work through those kinks. That's number one. Number two, I need to feel some emotional ownership of the process, that I've given some potentially, and this is not always the case, some input into the design, development, deployment of this, so that I believe this is what's going to be best and it fits my needs as strongly as possible. And then the only ask of the surgeon should be to go in and explain what the clinical problem is and why this technology is going to be better than the existing technology, if there is any. And that's all you ever ask of the doc. They shouldn't be asked to talk to the figures. They shouldn't be asked to talk to the cost structure. That's not relevant for them. They're there to pound their fist on the table and say, I need this because I have this problem that is inadequately addressed, and this will be a better solution than what I have now, and why. And if you ask them to do that, most of them will do that passionately.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, let them have their clinical voice, and don't try to give them a saxophone, a data saxophone, and ask them to play the data saxophone, right? Like give them just the megaphone for their own voice, so they can talk to that clinical. Here's why I need it. Here's the problem it's solving. And look, that VAC is going to have that data in front of them.
Exactly.
Right? So and you can reference the data is great, and I need this and it's solving this problem. So yeah, that was super, super helpful on that piece. So kind of wrapping things up, I do want to ask kind of about process of building a startup team. One thing I think you've done a really good job of, knowing, all the folks on the ComboSpine team well. It seems like, if you walked into a bar and saw all you guys hanging out, all you guys and gals hanging out, like you would just think you guys were friends, right? Because there's such a good culture mesh. I'm using culture in work ethic, just how you treat people, communicate, but just talk about how you as a founder and a leader of the business, focused on that, whether it was intentional or unintentional, but built a culture-centric team that's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, so very deliberate in my case. I knew there was a lot I didn't know. That's obvious. But I wanted to make sure I worked with people who matched up to me. So what was my culture? My culture is pretty hard work. It's immediate responsiveness. Responsiveness is something to me that's absolutely critical. I could not have had team members that take a week to respond to an email. In fact, there was a period of time where we did have a team member that was less responsive and that person wasn't able to stay. I wanted people that are ethical, that would put the patient first and the economic section second, because generally you do a good job with patient care, you get paid. But that responsiveness and that willingness to work hard, a high motor, I think is a phrase that's used, were big things for me. I didn't care if you lived local to me. Zoom, Teams, all work great. And I didn't care too much, actually, to be honest, about price tag for our consultants and our team. The right people are worth paying for. So that's how we've gone about the process. And we have a fantastic group of good, experienced folks because of it.
Yeah, no, amen. I think when there are things that are just deal breakers, don't shoehorn it in, right? Don't shoehorn anybody in, right? Like, pace, responsiveness, just, kindness, ethical, like if they don't check those boxes, then it's never going to work, even if it does for a little bit, right?
Right.
I always say, don't ignore the yellow flags, right? It may not be a red flag, but don't ignore those yellow flags, right? Either address it or, don't just dismiss it though. Either address it and move forward or address it and say, this isn't going to work out, right? But
I would add on to the end of that real quick, Spencer. It's the distributors you work with are an extension of your company. And there are those that are very ethical and very successful, and those that are less ethical and very successful, and those that are ethical and not successful, and those that are not ethical and not successful. That's the grid. Those people, if you hook up, pardon the expression, with bad folks, they will destroy your brand image no matter how successful you are at a bottom line. And at some point, people will not want to work with you. Don't compromise in that place either.
Yeah. Wisdom, guys. So we will wrap it up there. Josh, if people want to follow you, check out what you're doing with ComboSpine, where can they find you?
So if you want to see what we're doing with ComboSpine, check us out at combospine.com. From a social media perspective, our LinkedIn is probably the place to take a look at us at ComboSpine. We post every week. We post about topics that are near and dear to spine surgeons, to industry, not always just ComboSpine focused topics, but we would invite anybody to see what we're doing, and certainly any young entrepreneurs or older entrepreneurs who are looking for somebody to bounce ideas off of and try to avoid some of the mistakes I made. Please feel free to reach out to me at that platform.
Yeah, and we will put all of the ComboSpine and Josh's LinkedIn in the show notes below as well. So we talked through the physician journey as an entrepreneur, key pitfalls, critical decisions, the challenges and the joys of fundraising as a startup, as well as building the right team. So Josh, I can't thank you enough. As always, an absolute pleasure. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for listening to this episode. Until next time, see you later.
Thanks, Spencer. Take care.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you.